Welcome, viewers. Behind this dark analog noise, angry nations launched mind strikes. They did not use nuclear bombs or missiles. Instead, they weaponized newspapers and radio waves. The ultimate goal was not to destroy cities, but to rewrite history and control millions. Let us travel back to the dark dawn of the 1980s to see how this ruthless war began. The year is 1980. Our world is deeply divided by rising geopolitical tensions. Declassified records show that a new kind of battleground was rapidly emerging from the shadows. Massive radio antennas pierced the gray sky, targeting their unseen enemies across the ocean. Television anchors sat under bright studio lights, broadcasting carefully crafted messages. Every printed headline and spoken word was engineered to manipulate public perception. Western media began highlighting diplomatic fractures with extreme and heavy aggression. Technicians hunched over metallic soundboards, tuning frequencies to penetrate foreign borders. The invisible waves traveled silently through the atmosphere, carrying seeds of deep hostility. Historians note that truth became the very first casualty in this psychological warfare. Citizens sat in their living rooms, unknowingly consuming heavily weaponized information. Typewriters clattered like machine guns in dusty newsrooms, printing articles filled with deep bias. Front pages featured sensational stories designed to provoke intense fear and national anger. International broadcast became a daily battlefield where facts were heavily distorted. The global balance of power began to slowly shift, guided by carefully written paragraphs. No military uniforms were worn, yet the destructive impact rivaled conventional combat. If you were bombarded with coordinated lies every single day, could you still see the truth? This question haunted the early 80s, setting the stage for a brutal ideological clash. By 1981, the propaganda machine in the Middle East reached maximum output. Authorities systematically weaponized religion to construct an absolute enemy. Supreme leaders delivered fiery speeches from wooden podiums, casting harsh judgments. The terms Great Satan and Little Satan were officially coined to label former allies. These toxic phrases were not merely insults. They became standardized national policy. Massive, angry crowds gathered under the scorching hot sun, chanting newly mandated slogans. Fists aggressively punched the air as thick smoke rose from burning flags and torn diplomatic agreements. State television broadcasted these intense rallies repeatedly to normalize deep hatred. According to official records, independent voices were swiftly silenced and imprisoned. The printing presses ran continuously, churning out pamphlets filled with radical ideas. A psychological boundary was built, isolating the local populace from outside logic. Posters depicting the West as a demonic force were glued onto every ancient brick wall. Children in schools were taught to memorize aggressive verses instead of standard history. This systemic indoctrination effectively transformed entire generations into soldiers. Words became the primary ammunition in a war designed to conquer human thoughts completely. It was a masterful display of manipulation, utilizing fear to consolidate control. The relentless audio broadcasts crossed borders, echoing through mountain valleys and busy cities. Fear became the dominant currency, traded daily on the front pages of national newspapers. Clerics with stern faces demanded absolute obedience, punishing any sign of defiance. Dissenting journalists simply vanished, leaving behind empty desks and unfinished articles. The regime understood perfectly that a closed mind is much easier to govern than a free one. They crafted a terrifying narrative where the nation was constantly under imminent threat. By unifying the people against a phantom enemy, internal struggles were easily masked. Their rhetoric eliminated nuance, forcing everyone to choose a definitive side. The airwaves became heavily saturated with anger, drowning out pleas for peaceful dialogue. The entire nation was effectively locked inside a prison constructed of hostile words. Millions marched to the hypnotic rhythm of propaganda, entirely blind to the hidden truth. If history is written by the victors, what occurs when both sides firmly claim to hold absolute truth? The intense verbal assault from Tehran could not go unanswered by the Western alliance for long. By 1984, the Western response shifted from silent observation to aggressive action. Deep inside smoke-filled briefing rooms in Washington, strategic countermeasures were finally drawn up. Politicians slammed classified dossiers onto heavy oak tables, finalizing their urgent plans. The new strategy was extremely clear: isolate the adversary through a global media blitz. Western agencies actively labeled the new regime as the leading existential threat to peace. Agents carefully fed selected information directly to prominent journalists. Television networks synchronized their narratives to project an image of absolute terror. The counter-propaganda used cultural differences to breed heavy mistrust and deep public fear. Experts gave ominous geopolitical analysis on primetime broadcasts every evening. The image of a hostile, chaotic desert nation was permanently burned into Western minds. Economic sanctions were fiercely justified on the front pages of major global newspapers. It was a brilliantly coordinated psychological operation on a massive scale. Declassified files confirmed that manipulating foreign media was a vital defensive act. Radio Free Europe and other stations beamed alternative narratives across the iron borders. They aimed to spark internal rebellion by whispering promises of freedom into earpieces. This invisible war of words created a highly toxic echo chamber on a global scale. Diplomats engaged in fierce verbal combat at the United Nations, slamming fists in pure anger. The rhetoric grew incredibly sharp, transforming old alliances into bitter rivalries. A deep psychological iron curtain descended, heavily fortified by thousands of lies. Western audiences were carefully trained to view the Eastern Bloc through a lens of suspicion. Neutrality was completely eliminated from the modern journalistic dictionary.
Suggesting a level of deception previously thought impossible.
The truth was stretched, mutilated, and reassembled to fit the aggressive agendas of men. Broadcasters utilized dramatic tone inflections to heavily imply danger in the shadows. Subliminal messaging and repetitive framing techniques were masterfully deployed daily.
One fought not with soldiers, but with secrets and disinformation.
A veteran reporter noted that fighting with words requires the ruthless precision of a sniper. Paranoia spread like a wild virus, easily infecting the minds of working-class citizens. The media-industrial complex grew, fueled by the highly lucrative business of global fear. Cameras captured stern faces of politicians who demanded increasing military budgets. The justification for endless conflict was continuously manufactured in studios. Every night, the public was fed a carefully curated diet of intense anxiety. Reality became completely buried beneath massive mountains of diplomatic deception. To win a war without firing a single bullet, you must conquer the collective imagination. This relentless psychological barrage cemented a devastating divide across the world. The counterattack was a dark success, effectively blinding both sides to their shared humanity. As the dark 1980s progressed, the information war entered its most ruthless and destructive phase. It was not enough to spread lies. The past itself had to be violently erased from existence. A systematic campaign was launched to destroy all photographic evidence of prior unity. Images of agricultural and intelligence cooperation from the 70s were purged. Shadowy government censors descended upon national libraries, carrying heavy red stamps. Historical archives were permanently sealed shut, and countless history books were thrown into the fire. The warm, flickering flames consumed the paper, turning decades of diplomacy into floating ash. An old, exhausted journalist stood helplessly in the dark corner, watching the truth slowly burn away. He silently puffed on a cigarette, knowing that the ink of history was replaced by thick soot. To rewrite the narrative, both regimes needed younger generations to have total amnesia. Children growing up on opposite sides of the vast globe were taught a singular, highly distorted fact. They learned early on that people across the distant ocean were nothing short of absolute evil. Photographs showcasing the previous era of peaceful trade were systematically destroyed. The memory of a functional alliance was expertly assassinated by heavy stamps. For these regimes, erasing the past was the only guaranteed method to secure their dark futures. By controlling the fully documented past, leaders securely controlled the angry future. Two innocent young generations matured, utterly blinded to their heavily intertwined roots. Academic textbooks were entirely rewritten to portray the rival as a beast. Merely suggesting a peaceful dialogue suddenly became an act of absolute, dark treason. The tired bureaucrats of history worked relentlessly under flickering yellow light. Millions of printed pages turned into floating black ash, silencing the collective memory. The veteran reporter watched his life's honest work violently vanish into thin air. He quickly realized the true tragedy was not just the destroyed paper, but the completely lost minds. An impenetrable wall of absolute distrust was successfully built across the world. As the dark 1980s finally drew to a close, the devastating damage was fully done. This profound psychological divide would haunt global relations for several decades. A single half-burned newspaper slowly floats down an empty, silent metropolitan street. Its heavily torn front page boldly displays completely contradictory and hateful headlines. The bitterly freezing cold wind carries these toxic words away into the vast, unforgiving night. It is merely a fragile piece of printed paper, yet it holds the immense power to destroy. The violent storm of radio static finally fades into a deep, unsettling silence. This invisible battlefield claimed absolutely no physical lives, but it conquered human souls. The echoes of this propaganda war still shape our world. History was erased and rewritten. Do you believe that media is still a weapon now? Share your honest thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe now. Share it with friends to support our channel.